She had been stood up before, but never inside a locked room with the most feared man in Boston, walking straight toward her, and it took Cora Maddox 3 full minutes to understand that the disaster wasn't that her date never came. The disaster was that he'd sent her there on purpose. The candles had burned down to stubs on table 17. Cora knew because she'd been counting them, the way a person counts anything when they're trying not to count the minutes. 40 of them. That was how long she'd been sitting alone at a table set for 2 in the gold and cream ballroom of the Rookwood Hotel, while 200 of Boston's wealthiest people swirled around her in tuxedos and gowns that cost more than her car. 40 minutes. Not 3 hours. She wasn't an idiot, and she had her pride, what was left of it. She'd told herself when she sat down that she'd give him until the salad course cleared. And the salad course had cleared, and then she'd given him until the band finished their set, because his last text had said traffic on 93. Almost there, save my seat. You have no idea how much I want to see you tonight. That text had come at 7:52. It was 8:31 now. She'd read it maybe 9 times. The way you press on a bruise to see if it still hurts. It still hurt. Cora smoothed the burgundy silk of her dress over her hips. Wide hips, soft stomach, the body she'd spent 31 years making excuses for. And reminded herself that she had picked this dress because the woman at the consignment shop in Jamaica Plain had clasped her hands together and said, "Honey, that color was made for you." And it was. Deep wine red, draped to flatter, the kind of dress that made her feel, for once, like the main character instead of the friend who held coats. She'd skipped lunch to fit into it. She'd practiced what she'd say. She'd shaved her legs and done her own eyeliner twice, because her hand shook the first time. And Marcus Dean hadn't come. They'd matched 3 kawaii ago on one of those apps her sister had bullied her into. He'd seemed different. He asked questions and listened to the answers. He'd said, and she'd believed him, God help her, that he was tired of women who performed thinness, that he liked a woman who took up space and wasn't sorry about it. He'd been the one to pick the Rookwood. He'd pulled strings, he said, to get them on the guest list for the Children's Hospital charity gala. Wear something that makes you feel like a queen, he'd texted. I want to walk in with the most beautiful woman in the room. She'd worn the dress. She'd felt like a queen for almost an hour. Now she felt like a woman in a costume, and the silk that had felt like armor felt like a flag. Too bright, too loud, marking her out in a sea of muted designer black as the one person at the party who had no one. Can I bring you anything else, miss? The waiter, a kid really, 22 maybe, name tag that read Eli, had circled back for the 4th time. He had the careful, gentle voice people used on the recently bereaved. He pitied her. She could see it. That was the worst part. Just the check for the wine, Cora said, and her voice came out even, which surprised her. I think I'm going to head out. Of course, Eli hesitated. For what it's worth, you look really nice tonight. That nearly undid her. She gave him a tight smile and looked down at her clutch so he wouldn't see her eyes go hot. She pulled out her phone. 2 missed calls from her best friend Priya. How's it going? Send a pic. Is he cute in person? And nothing from Marcus. She typed and deleted 3 different things. I waited. Delete. I hope you're okay. Did something happen? Delete. In the end, she just blocked the number, and the small mechanical satisfaction of that, the grey blocked notification, was the only thing in the last hour that hadn't hurt. She was reaching for her clutch, sliding to the edge of her chair, one hand already braced on the white tablecloth, to push herself up and out and into the cold October night, where at least she could cry without an audience, when the room changed. It didn't change with a scream. It changed with silence. The string quartet in the corner stopped mid-phrase, the cellist's bow lifting off the strings with a soft, startled exhale of sound. The laughter near the bar died. A champagne flute clinked too loudly against a tray, and then nothing, a hush spreading across the ballroom like cold water poured over warm sand. every head turning toward the wide double doors at the entrance. 3 men stood there in dark suits, not gala suits, suits that were doing a job, and the people of Boston, the surgeons, the developers, the city councilman Cora had recognized earlier. The woman with the diamonds the size of grapes went pale and quiet and small, the way a room of confident people goes when something walks in that all of them have heard about and none of them ever wanted to meet. The man in the center stepped forward. He was tall in a way that rearranged the space around him, broad through the shoulders, with dark hair shot through at the temples, with gray and a face that looked like it had been carved by someone who'd run out of patience halfway through. 40s, a jaw shadowed with stubble, a scar threading pale through one eyebrow. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The hotel apologizes for the interruption, he said. And his voice was low and rough and absolutely without hurry, a voice used to being the last word in every room it entered. The evening is over. You'll gather your things. You'll go out through the service corridor on the left. You'll do it now, and you won't look back, and tomorrow none of you will remember being here. Nobody argued. That was the thing that frightened Cora most. 200 of the most powerful people in the city stood up like obedient schoolchildren, abandoning half-eaten plates of duck and untouched glasses of $40 wine. And they fled, quietly, urgently, tripping over their own chairs in their hurry to reach the service doors. A man in a tux pulled his wife by the wrist. The councilman went out without his coat. Cora stood frozen at table 17. Her legs wouldn't work. She told them to. She watched the crowd thin and stream toward the exit, and she thought, "Move, move, you idiot, go with them." But her body had locked, her knuckles white where she gripped the back of her chair, and somewhere in the animal part of her brain a voice was screaming that if she ran, she'd be noticed, and being noticed was the most dangerous thing in the world. Within 90 seconds, the great gold ballroom was empty. Empty except for the dark-suited men by the door, a knot of terrified hotel staff pressed against the wall by the kitchen, the man with the gray-streaked hair, and Cora, in her burgundy dress, the brightest thing in a room of overturned chairs and guttering candles. The man raised one hand, a flick of 2 fingers, almost lazy. Behind him, one of his men slid the great doors shut, and a bolt went home with a heavy final clack that Cora felt in her teeth. Then he turned and he looked at her. His footsteps made no sound on the parquet as he crossed the room. He walked past the abandoned tables without glancing at them. Straight toward the corner, straight toward her, and with every step Cora's heart slammed harder against her ribs until she was sure he could hear it. He stopped at table 17. Up close he was overwhelming. Not loud, but dense, like standing next to something with its own gravity. He smelled of cedar and cold air, and something underneath it, sharp and clean, that her body recognized as danger before her mind did. His eyes were a pale, unsettling gray, and they moved over her once. Her stricken face, her white-knuckled hands, the empty chair across from her with its untouched water glass. Without asking, the most dangerous man in Boston pulled out the chair where Marcus Dean was supposed to be sitting, and he sat down. "You must be the bookkeeper," he said. Cora's panic short-circuited into pure confusion. "I'm what? The what?" He tilted his head. He had a way of looking at her, patient and total, like a man examining a card that hadn't come up the way he expected. He reached out one large hand and ran a fingertip along the rim of Marcus's empty water glass, slow, thoughtful. "Though I'll admit," he murmured, "you don't look like a woman who launders other men's money for a living." His grey eyes lifted to hers. "Tell me, where is Marcus Dean?" The name dropped between them like a stone into still water. "Marcus?" The word came out cracked. You know Marcus. Know him." A thin, humorless smile touched the corner of his mouth. "I own him." Or I did, until 2 nights ago, when I found $400,000 missing from an account he was supposed to be watching for me. He told my people he'd meet his partner here tonight. He spread his hands. taking in the wreckage of the Gala. The burgundy dress, the woman who had been left alone for 40 minutes, at a table for two. He swore his partner would have the drive, the account numbers, the offshore routing, everything. He swore it on his daughter's life. So my men cleared the building, and we waited. The grey eyes pinned her. And here you are, and Marcus Dean is nowhere. The truth arrived in Cora's chest all at once, like ice water poured straight down her spine. There was no charity dinner date. There had never been a man who liked women who took up space. Marcus Dean wasn't a kind, slightly nervous architect from Quincy, who loved his mother and listened when she talked. Marcus Dean was a thief, and he had known, from the very first message, that the man whose money he'd stolen would track him to the Rookwood. He had needed a body in that seat. Something visible, something that would buy him time to run, while a ruthless man's attention landed on a woman in a red dress who didn't know a thing. He hadn't stood her up. He had used her as bait. She'd spent 40 minutes drowning in shame, picking apart her own face, her own body, certain that some man had taken one good look and decided she wasn't worth the trip, and it had been a lie, worse than a lie. A setup, cold and deliberate, designed around the one thing he'd correctly guessed about her. That a woman like her, sweet and overlooked and starving for someone to choose her, would wait, would give him until the salad course cleared, would save his seat, and the fear that had paralyzed Cora's legs and locked her hands evaporated. All of it, every drop, burned clean away by something hotter and much, much better. Rage, that son of a bitch, Cora breathed. The man across the table went still. One dark eyebrow rose a fraction of an inch. That absolute, lying, cowardly son of a bitch. Her hand came down flat on the table, and the silverware jumped, and she did not care. She did not care that there were 3 armed men by the door, or that the devil himself was sitting in Marcus Dean's chair, watching her, with an expression she couldn't read. Do you know what I did today? I skipped lunch. I skipped lunch so I'd fit into this dress. I spent 2 weeks' grocery money on it. I practiced what I was going to say to him in the mirror like an absolute fool because I thought. Her voice broke, and she steadied it through pure fury. Because I thought somebody finally saw me. And he used me. He sat me down at this table like a decoy, like I was a parking cone he set out so you'd look at me instead of him. She stopped, breathing hard. The candle stubs flickered. The man across from her had not moved, but something in his face had shifted, some calculation rearranging itself behind those grey eyes. You didn't know, he said. It wasn't a question exactly. It was a man revising the map of the world. I thought he was an architect, Cora said, and laughed, a wet, furious sound. He said he designed schools. For a long moment the man simply regarded her. Then he leaned back in Marcus' chair, the leather creaking under him, and folded his hands. My name, he said, is Salvatore Rinaldi. She knew the name. Everyone in the city knew the name, the way you knew the name of a storm. The Don, the man the newspapers couldn't print without 3 lawyers signing off. The man whose enemies developed sudden fatal interests in international travel. The King of the North End, her father used to say, with a kind of grim respect, back when her father still spoke to anyone. Cora Maddox, she said, because she didn't know what else to do with a man like that except give him her name. Cora. He tested it the way you'd test the weight of something. You came here to be loved, Cora Maddox, and instead you were handed to me to be killed. He said it without cruelty, almost gently, which was somehow worse. Do you understand the position you're in? I'm starting to, she said. My men think you're his partner. They think you have my money. He watched her. Convince me you don't, and quickly, because the alternative to convincing me is not something a woman in a beautiful dress should have to experience. And here was the thing about Cora Maddox that Marcus Dean had never bothered to learn, the thing the consignment shop owner had seen and the dating app had flattened into nothing. She was, underneath the apology she wore like a second skin, extraordinarily smart. She had spent her whole life being underestimated, and she had spent it watching. She counted candle stubs. She read rooms. She remembered things people said when they thought she wasn't worth remembering, so she didn't beg, she thought. "He told you his partner had a flash drive," she said slowly. "The routing numbers, the offshore accounts. He did. Then he told you a lie inside a lie." Cora leaned forward, and for the first time all night she forgot to be afraid of her own body, forgot to make herself small, because Marcus Dean doesn't trust anybody enough to give them a drive with $400,000 worth of your secrets on it. "I went out with that man, texted with him, talked to him on the phone for 3 weeks, and I can tell you he is exactly the kind of man who keeps everything himself and trusts no one. There's no partner, Mr. Rinaldi. The partner is the cover story. He invented a person who had the drive so you'd waste tonight, hunting a ghost in a red dress while he got on a plane." She paused. "Check the airports. Logan, Manchester, Providence. Private charters, not commercial. A man who skims 400 grand doesn't fly coach." The silence that followed was the longest of her life. Then Salvatore Rinaldi turned his head very slightly toward the men by the door. "Enzo," he said. "Tonio, tell Bishop to pull the manifests. Logan first, private terminal." One of the men was already lifting a phone to his ear. Rinaldi turned back to her, and now there was something new in the way he looked at her, something that made the back of her neck prickle. Not pity. Not the gentle, terrible pity of the waiter named Eli. The opposite of it. He was looking at her the way a man looks at a thing he didn't expect to find, and now cannot stop seeing. "Tell me, Cora Maddox," he said quietly. "What do you do when you're not being used as bait at charity galas?" "I'm an accountant," she said. "A real one. I do the books for a catering company and 3 restaurants in the South End." Her chin came up, just a little. "I'm very good at it. I notice when numbers are wrong. I notice when anything's wrong, actually. It's sort of my whole thing." The corner of his mouth moved. It might have been the beginning of a smile. On a different man, it would have been nothing. On this one, it felt like the sun coming out over a glacier. "Yes," he said. "I'm beginning to see that." What happened over the next 2 hours, Cora would later struggle to explain to anyone, because there was no version of it that didn't sound insane. She did not run. She could have. The bolt came off the doors once it was clear she was no one's partner, and Rinaldi told her, with a courtesy that didn't match anything else about him, that she was free to go and that a car would take her wherever she liked. She thought about it. She stood up. She got as far as the doors, and then she stopped, because she was thinking about her own books, about the catering company's accounts, and about a particular trick a dishonest man had tried to pull on her 2 years ago, hiding theft inside a maze of small, legitimate transactions. And she turned around and said, "He didn't move the whole 400 at once, did he? Men like that never do. He moved it in pieces, small enough to look like normal business, which means there's a trail, and trails can be read, and if you let me look at the ledgers he was keeping, I can probably tell you not just where your money went, but where he's planning to spend it. Because a man doesn't steal that kind of money to admire it. He steals it to go somewhere and become someone new." Salvatore Rinaldi looked at her for a long, long moment. "Why?" he said. "Would you help me?" And Cora, who had spent 31 years apologizing for the space she took up, who had skipped lunch for a man who'd sold her for time, who had been counting candle stubs in a gold room full of people who looked through her like glass. Cora Maddox smiled. It was not a sweet smile. It surprised her how unsweet it was. "Because he made me feel small," she said. "And I want to watch him learn that was a mistake." They worked through the night in the back office of Rinaldi owned in the North End, a small dark room that smelled of garlic and old paper, with a single green-shaded lamp and a laptop and a box of files his men had pulled from Marcus Dean's apartment. Cora kicked off her heels. She rolled the sleeves of her cardigan. Someone had found her a cardigan. She had no idea who, and she went into the numbers the way she always did, the way that made the rest of the world go quiet. And she was good. She was so good it stopped him cold. Salvatore Rinaldi had men with MBAs. He had a forensic accountant in Manhattan he flew in twice a year and didn't trust. He had spent 20 years not being surprised by anyone, and he stood in the doorway of that little office at 2 in the morning and watched a plus-size woman in a burgundy gala dress and a borrowed cardigan unspool his enemy's entire escape plan from a column of grocery receipts and gas station charges, talking half to herself, tapping a pen against her lip, and he felt something move in his chest that he had assumed years ago had calcified shut for good. "Here," she said finally, at 3 a.m., turning the laptop toward him. He's been buying things, small things, paid in cash mostly, but twice he slipped. A deposit on a fishing boat in Gloucester and a wire to a property management company in Portland, Maine. "He's not flying anywhere, Mr. Rinaldi. He wants you to think he flew. He's going north by water, slow, where nobody's watching, and he's going to disappear into a little house on the coast and wait for you to chase a plane to Argentina." She sat back. "He'll be at the boat by dawn. Men like him love a sunrise getaway. They think it's poetic." The Don did not say anything for a while. When he finally spoke, it was not about the money. "You said he made you feel small," Salvatore said. "Marcus Dean." Cora blinked. Yes, look at me." She did. His grey eyes were steady and pale in the lamplight. "He was wrong," the Don said. "About all of it." He saw a woman he could spend. "I'm looking at a woman who broke a plan it took him a year to build, in 5 hours, in a dress, on an empty stomach. You are not small, Cora Maddox. You are the most dangerous thing in this room, and that includes me." A pause. "And I have never said that to anyone in my life." Cora discovered that she had forgotten how to breathe. The sun was just coming up grey and cold over the harbour. When they found Marcus Dean at a marina in Gloucester, exactly where she'd said he'd be, loading a duffel bag onto a 40-foot boat with a fresh haircut and a windbreaker, and the relaxed, satisfied look of a man who has gotten away with it. He had not gotten away with it. Cora had not wanted to come. Salvatore had told her she didn't need to, that this part wasn't for her, that he would handle it and have her home in the South End by breakfast, with a number to call if she ever needed anything for the rest of her life. And she had thought about that, about going home, climbing out of the dress at last, pretending the whole impossible night had been a fever. And then she'd thought about Marcus Dean's windbreaker and his sunrise getaway and the text that said, "You have no idea how much I want to see you tonight." And she had said, "No, I want him to see my face." So she stood on the cold concrete of the dock, in the borrowed cardigan and the burgundy dress, with Salvatore Rinaldi's heavy overcoat draped over her shoulders because he'd put it there without a word the second she shivered, and she watched Marcus Dean turn around and go white. "Cora?" His mouth worked. His eyes flicked from her to the man beside her, to the men fanning out across the dock, and the duffel bag slipped from his hand and thumped onto the deck. "Cora, what is this? What are you doing here? You don't understand. They made me. The Gallaghers, they forced me to—" "There's no partner, Marcus," Cora said. Her voice carried clear across the cold water, steady as a bell. "I told him there was never a partner. There was just me, in a chair, holding your seat." She took a step forward, and another, and she was not small. She took up every inch of space she occupied, and she was glad of all of it. "You knew I'd wait. That's the part I keep thinking about. You looked at me and you knew I'd sit there and skip lunch and save your seat, because that's what a woman like me does, right? Grateful, easy, eager to please." She stopped a few feet from him. "You bet your whole life on me being too pathetic to leave that table. Cora, you should have bet on me being too smart to fall for you twice." Salvatore Rinaldi stepped up beside her then, unhurried, and placed one large hand against the small of her back, warm, certain, protective and possessive at once, and let Marcus Dean see exactly where the power in that situation stood. "You stole from me, Dean," the Don said. in that low voice that didn't need to rise. "That I could have made quick, but you used her." His thumb moved, just slightly against the curve of Cora's spine. "You took a good woman, and you spent her like loose change. That I am going to take my time with." Marcus Dean looked in absolute horror at the Don's hand on Cora's back. She's with you?" Salvatore didn't answer him. He turned his head and looked down at Cora, and the whole cold grey world seemed to hold still, and he asked her. Quietly, just for her, as if there were no men on the dock, and no thief on the boat, and no money in the world. "Does he go in the water, Cora, or does he walk away?" And Cora Maddox understood that he meant it, that he was handing her something no one had ever handed her in her life. Not power exactly, but weight, the right to decide, the acknowledgement that she was a person whose choice could move the world an inch. She looked at Marcus Dean, the man who'd called her soft and real and meant it as a hook, who'd made her feel desired so he could use her up, who, even now, even cornered, was looking at her with the dawning, contemptuous surprise of a man who could not believe the parking cone had a say. She thought about ice cubes melted in a water glass. She thought about a waiter's pity. She thought about every table she'd ever held a seat at for somebody who never came. "Take out the trash," Cora said. A predatory, beautiful thing moved across Salvatore Rinaldi's face. He bent and pressed his lips to the top of her head, a gesture so tender it didn't belong anywhere near that dock, and then he straightened. "Enzo," he said, "Mr. Dean is leaving us. See that he goes quietly." She didn't watch what happened after that. She had decided she would not, and she found she meant it. She turned her face into the collar of the Don's overcoat. It smelled of cedar and cold, and him, and she let the sound of the gulls and the slap of the harbor water cover everything else. And when it was over and the dock was quiet, Salvatore Rinaldi turned her gently by the shoulders to face him. The wind off the water whipped her hair across her face. He reached up and tucked it back, both hands coming to cradle her jaw, and his pale grey eyes searched hers with an intensity that should have frightened her, and did not even a little. "He was wrong about you," the Don said, very low, "and so was everyone before him. Every person who ever taught you to make yourself small." His thumbs moved along her cheekbones. "I have spent 20 years learning to read people in a single glance, Cora Maddox, because reading them wrong gets me killed. And I have never in my life been as glad to be in a room with someone as I was the moment you opened your mouth and called Marcus Dean a son of a bitch." A laugh escaped her, helpless and astonished, half a sob. "Come home with me," he said. "Not as anyone's bait, not anyone's afterthought. Come and stand next to me where I can watch the whole room realize what I already know." His voice dropped further still. "I will spend the rest of my life making certain you never sit alone at a table again." And Cora Maddox, who had walked into the Rookwood Hotel 12 hours ago, certain she was the least important person in the room, who had counted candle stubs and practiced apologies in the mirror, reached up, fisted her hands in the lapels of the most dangerous man in Boston, and pulled him down to her. He kissed her like a man who had found something he'd stopped believing existed. She kissed him back like a woman stepping, finally, out of the corner of every room she'd ever shrunk inside of, and into the center where the light was, where she'd always had every right to stand. The sun came up gold over the grey water. Somewhere to the north, a thief's empty boat rocked at its mooring, and on a cold dock in Gloucester, with an overcoat around her shoulders that smelled of cedar and danger and devotion, Cora Maddox stopped, at long last, apologizing for the space she took up. But here is the question the harbor wind carried away that morning. The question still waiting to be answered. A man as careful as Salvatore Rinaldi does not clear a ballroom of 200 witnesses over $400,000. That kind of money is an excuse, not a reason. So what was really on the drive Marcus Dean swore he'd deliver? And who, in a city full of men who feared the Don, had paid a small-time bookkeeper to make sure it never reached him? Cora didn't know it yet, standing in the sunrise with her hands in his lapels. But the most dangerous night of her life had only been the beginning. What would you have done, sitting at that table, watching the doors lock? Would you have run with the crowd, or stayed and played the hand you were dealt? Tell us in the comments, and if Cora's story got under your skin, hit that subscribe button and stay close. Because the Moretti Drive has secrets even the Don hasn't read yet, and the next chapter is going to burn.